I've tested it in the NR200P Max and the NR200P V2, but looking back, I realized I have never done this build in the OG. Welcome to Machines More. So the vertical GPU with dual exhausting airflow at the top and the bottom, that's what I'm referring to. This is actually a special airflow configuration in the NR200, and you can do this with the Max or the V2 as well, as long as you use the ventilated side panel. So the basic idea here is that you have your case and your rad fans exhausting, and that's going to encourage the makeup air to come in through the side panel, and that happens to be where your GPU is drawing air from, so it tends to benefit the card quite a bit. So I thought I would do this build here in the OG. We'll talk real quick about the overview of the build process here with the Be Quiet Pure Loop 2, and then we'll see how close we can get to the vertical GPU only Max and V2. Okay, for this build we're gonna go with a vertical GPU layout. In the original NR200P, you can only place the 240 at the bottom instead of the top. You could mount the rad on the side, but since we're doing a vertical GPU, we cannot put a radiator there. For this build, we're going to go with the Be Quiet Pure Loop 2 FX. This is the latest version of the Pure Loop 2 from Be Quiet. What's special about this unit is that we've got a inline pump here, and that mitigates the concern with having a radiator on the bottom. Traditionally speaking, with your typical pump in CPU block units, when you have the radiator at the bottom and the pump is over here, you have the possibility of getting air bubbles in the pump because that's the highest point, and that's not going to be the case with this unit here. For this build, I'm going to go with the X670E ITX board and the 7900X just to match up these specs. We did do a different board in the NR200P V2 build, but this is the one I have free right now, so we'll use this one. Of course, it is missing a couple of features. For one, it doesn't have a front audio or any audio on this board, and that is delegated to the Hive device that's separate. So we won't be using this front audio cable. So I'm just going to use the power switch connector. With this board, you do have the add-on card, which I have used in the past. I'm just going to be lazy and not use it here because I'm just trying to test out the thermal properties to see how close we can get. The Pure Loop 2 FX does come with these RGB fans, which I've used before in my original review. But for this build, I wanted to use the same fans as I tested the NR200P V2 with. So we will switch over to the T30s, and there is just going to be enough clearance underneath the riser cable to fit those thicker fans. So the 240 attaches at the bottom directly. Pretty simple here. All right, with this board, the fan connections are at the top, so we're going to loop an extension cable here to get the fan to the bottom. Fans will be daisy chained together, so this fan at the radiator, first one will just hook up like that to there. Pop in the radiator hardware. Use some more of this Thermal Hero stuff. Pretty good results with it. The only thing is you do have to spread it. And we're using Cooler Master 850 watt unit. So one thing I haven't done before in the NR200 with an SFX power supply is run it in the higher SFX-L position. What I want to do is try to give as much clearance at the bottom here, and then it turns out that if I take off the fan grill at the top, should have no problem clearing this guy over here. So this is just another view SFX-L position. Without the fan grill, you do have to be extra careful that nothing gets in the way of the fan. But once you have everything cinched up, it shouldn't be a problem. Do a little cable management, plug in this cable over here. Okay. Of course, having raised the power supply up off the surface gives us the advantage. And we don't have to worry about things being too tight under here. Okay. The goal here is to give this as much space here as possible, because we are having to manage this pump, and that's going to have to go underneath behind the graphics card, so we want to make this as streamlined as possible. Tighten this CPU block down. I should have enough room here for the graphics card, so I had to try to space this up a little bit higher. The pump does have a light. I guess we'll plug it in. Shouldn't have any issues with clearing the fan at the top. Just make sure everything is like that, not too high. Okay, so that'll hold these securely. And we'll connect the splitter cable to this. So at the top here, we do have to be very careful because we put the power supply here in the higher position. This is not any different than the regular NR200 setup, so we just had to make sure we are clear on the cables, because I did take away the fan cage here. Couldn't fit the cage over here. That's why. On the right side. This is a Gen 3 cable, so more than likely we'll have to set it to that in BIOS. Fortunately, with Ryzen 7000, they all have integrated graphics, so we can just boot up with the integrated graphics first. Still a good amount of room underneath the riser cable, you see. So we should be good. Just to give the fans a quick spin. Pretty simple, actually. Just gonna take these guys off at the back and I'll hang the graphics card. Okay, so the card slots into here like that. So that card is in. Let's double check the riser cable. Okay. Interestingly, we're really close to the top here with this cable, but everything seems to be fine. And so just got lucky here. This tube is right behind. It's not kinked. Could probably do a little bit better cable management here, but it will work for now. Put the side panel back on. And because we're doing a dual exhaust here, you don't need the dust filter at the bottom. Compared to the V2, this build has one additional case fan, and underneath the V2's riser cable, you could stick a small fan, but it would be significantly impeded by the riser cable. And here between the rad fan and the riser cable, you still have a good amount of clearance. So I did test this one out, and with the CPU only scenario, the performance is a little bit worse. In fact, because of the elevated CPU temp, I couldn't hold the same locked all-core clocks for the 7900X here. Now, it did hold the 5.4 gigahertz clock for the gaming test, but I had to downclock 50 megahertz for the CPU render, which is an all-core process. But either way, same voltage and power draw here. It's about 2.5 degree delta. Here we are using the same Fantex T30s at the same exact RPM, so some of the difference will come down to the AIO unit itself. And while the Pure Loop 2 is a pretty good unit, from my testing, it's not as good as the Cooler Master PL240 that I used for the V2 testing. And while operationally having this style of radiator bottom mounted is totally fine since your pump is not in the highest point of the loop, the position of the unit, though, is not as optimal airflow-wise, and having a top-mounted radiator here allows the exhaust to escape more freely, resulting in better cooling. But the main point of this type of airflow configuration is not for the CPU, because if we really wanted to prioritize the rad, we would just intake here. The main point is for a GPU involved scenario, since we're trying to encourage air to feed right here. So let's just take a look at the 1440p gaming test. Lo and behold, these are pretty incredible GPU temps for this card, and we are basically the same as the V2. Interestingly, we have better CPU temps for the OG. Not a really significant difference or meaningful difference at this level for gaming, right? But it is what it is. The OG actually has better CPU temps for this setup, and I think part of this is due to the fact that in this OG setup, the more attractive exit path for the GPU's exhaust is the top fans, plus they're closer to the top fans. as opposed to the radiator here. It's farther away and there's less airflow here. So you have less GPU exhaust heating up the coolant. In the V2, the rad being at the top is going to pass more GPU exhaust through. So that would be my theory on why there's a delta here for the CPU temps in the gaming scenario. Not that it's a meaningful difference, but good news is as long as you can fit the graphics card you want in the OG, which this is actually a moderately large card already, and there's still a little bit more length here, right? And this pump may get in the way with a longer card. But you can achieve similar results to the NR200P V2 while also having the flexibility to do other things, in this case, if you want to change up the setup. So for practical purposes, in a combined scenario, the performance between these two dual exhaust setups, it's going to be the same. So I'll touch on another few quick differences before we close this video out. First off, the OG, it is showing its age since I mentioned that Gen 3 riser cable. I did have to boot in with the integrated graphics and manually set the board to run in Gen 3 mode before switching over the display cable to the card directly. So that's a little bit of an inconvenience, but performance-wise, if you are using something as powerful as the 4090, you're going to see a small decline in performance, like single-digit percentages with the Gen 4 versus Gen 3. It's going to be really, really close, but in fact, for cards lesser than that, it's really going to be negligible, but it's good to be aware of the potential difference. Now there's going to be the front panel I/O. The V2 is a lot more up to speed with the C port, but you do still have a reset button with the OG, But otherwise, if you can get an AIO with an inline pump, you can get a pretty comparable result with the OG still with this type of dual exhaust setup, and this one is a real trooper still. He can do so much more than just this, so don't give up on it yet. So I hope you enjoyed that quick build and quick look here. It's one to try out if you have the case already. Please check out the component links down below. Please give a like and make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.